This is the Real Estate Shop, where each episode will bring you a top industry expert to share their current programs or projects that are making an impact in our communities today. Be sure to check us out on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Welcome to the Real Estate Shop. Today we are lucky to have Leroy Moore, Senior Vice President and Chief Operating Officer of the Tampa Housing Authority.
Leroy, thanks for joining us. Pleasure to have you on the Real Estate Shop. For the benefit of the audience, why don't you just maybe give an introduction so they can get to know who you are?
Yes, hello, Curvin and Stephen. It's a real pleasure to be on your show. Thank you so much for the invitation. I am Leroy Moore. I am currently the Senior Vice President, Chief Operating Officer for Tampa Housing Authority here in Tampa, Florida. We're a public housing agency, but we actually are not your typical public housing agency in that we've got actually a multi-state reach in our business operations. We not only operate affordable housing that we own and manage that is subsidized by the federal government here in Tampa, Florida, but we also do contract work for the federal government statewide Florida, over 43,000 units that we provide compliance and management and oversight and support to landlords, as well as about 1,500 units in the U.S. Virgin Islands. And then we've got a number of other business operations that we conduct that's always in the affordable housing arena. And what it does is that it gives us some independent revenue streams to help support that underperforming asset class that we own, which is the public housing program. So that's a little bit about Tampa Housing Authority and me in particular. I've been in this role for now 25 years, if you can believe it. And been in the industry for about 34 years all total, having worked, in the South and the North, on the West Coast and on the East Coast, and put down roots here in Tampa 25 years ago, and best career decision I made.
Wow, 25 years.
Yes.
Whew. Looking at your LinkedIn profile, I see that you graduated from the University of Memphis.
Yes.
What was your professional progression from there when you left the university?
Yeah, and back in those days, believe it or not, it was actually the Memphis State, not University of Memphis, but Memphis State University, MSU. The MSU Tigers back in the day. I actually majored in architectural engineering technology. It was a four-year degree that actually, gave you a little bit of engineering as well as a little bit of architecture. From there, I got into the Memphis Housing Authority as a specifications writer, writing technical specs for construction projects, rose to my first directorship there. I left Memphis Housing Authority for my first directorship outside of Memphis in Peoria, Illinois, believe it or not, home of Richard Pryor. Worked there for about 4 years in Peoria, rebuilding their public housing stock, and got noticed by the executive director at that time of the Oakland Housing Authority, who offered me the opportunity to come and work in Oakland, California. Truly loved it out there. Made some really great friendships and did some awesome work in Oakland. Truly loved it. Never saw myself leaving, believe it or not, until I got the phone call about the opportunity to be part of the receivership for the Washington, D.C. Housing Authority. And, could not turn that opportunity down. So, left Oakland in pursuit of that opportunity in D.C. It was turned into a 3-year job as part of the receivership team there. And, it was also the opportunity for me to start my own business because I was a contract employee there. From there, moved my business to Chicago, eventually to Atlanta, and shut down my business when I took the job here in Tampa.
So you've been in Tampa for 25 years now. I mean, it's getting a lot of attention. A lot of folks are moving to Florida, particularly a lot of excitements around the Live Local Act right now. What's been your perception of the market, Tampa specifically, over the years?
Yeah, Tampa is certainly a hot market, one of the hottest markets in the U.S. In fact, Waterhouse-Coopers rated it as, I think, the seventh hottest real estate market in the U.S. for a couple of years now. It's always been in sort of top tier on the Urban Land Institute annual trends report. I think we got to the top 3 or 4 just last year with ULI. Really hot market, beautiful weather in Florida is a big driver for that. The cost of living in Florida, I think, is another driver for that. Low taxes in Florida. And we've seen consistent population in migration, mostly from the north and the northeast, cities coming to the more affordable Florida where they can, enjoy year-round pleasant weather and a lower cost of living. So, when I moved to Tampa in 1998, Tampa was not that cool, hip city. Tampa really sort of got its stride, in the early 2000s as we really started realizing that we didn't have any residential in our downtown core, and our downtown core was our biggest job market, and it's where the river runs right through the center of downtown, and the potential there was just enormous and just been overlooked for decades prior to that. We had a great dynamic developer thinking mayor that got into office that realized that, we really need to start making some strategic investments in the downtown core so that we can raise our living population there and turn our downtown into more of a 24-hour city. And here we are, 20 years or so later, and I think, that has greatly been realized in a large extent. Ybor City has now come alive. That's our historic entertainment district where you get a lot of the clubs and music and bars, and it's a great tourist location. So Ybor City has I think over 2,000 residential units now. Our downtown market is well over 6,000-7,000 units now, if not more, with the addition of our multi-billion-dollar project called Water Street, right on the water in our downtown market. And the Tampa Housing Authority has been intricately involved in a lot of that, in that we have holdings that are in downtown and, right on the river that we've, over the last 15 years, been able to position and redevelop and incredibly increase the density on, so that we can not only replace the public housing, the affordable housing that was there, but double and triple the unit count of affordable housing that are on those sites, and at the same time add market rate housing and other uses that actually bring jobs on site. So we've got 2 developments in the downtown market now that we've been redeveloping over the last decade or so. Encore Tampa, which went from 480 units of public housing now to 12 city blocks of development. We have 1,100 units occupied on that same site today, another 800 units under construction, and that site will top out at about 2,000 total units just in the next 2 years. In addition to residential, it would also have hotel, Tampa's African American History Museum, a new school. It has a 2-acre urban farm now, and a great deal of retail. So, that same 12 city block that was single-use public housing, 480 units for 75 years, for the next 75 years will be a very diverse 2,000 unit mixed-use community employing almost 1,000 people on that same footprint. Incredible transformative project that is a LEED Gold neighborhood development from a sustainability standpoint. So, and then just across the Hillsborough River, we've got another very large 44-acre, 17-phase project, if you can believe that, that literally just kicked off 6 years ago. And today, once again, we have 1,100 units completed and occupied on that site. We've got a dual branded hotel that's under contract. We've got Publix about to break ground on the grocery store on that site. And we've got Lennar building townhomes for sale on that same site. Another very transformative site that will, at the end of build out, have about 2,500 units that will replace the 670 units that we tore down. So, you know, Tampa has grown enormously in the last 20 years, and Tampa Housing Authority has been a very key part of that downtown transformation, ensuring that average people have the ability to live in a prospering neighborhood like our downtown, living close to jobs, close to our best transportation options, but close to all our best cultural amenities. So it's very important for us to have a community that welcomes everybody and is not just a luxury enclave where only the wealthiest people can afford to live there.
Excellent. Kind of walk through what you guys do, which is amazing. But when you got there 25 years ago, Leroy, were development deals already being done? What was it like when you first got there?
Yeah, when we first got here in 1998, you know, Tampa Housing Authority was, you know, was your typical public housing agency. It owned and managed public housing, and it had a few Section 8 vouchers as well. So at that time, we had, I want to say it was 4,000 public housing units and 2,000 Section 8 vouchers. So we were about 6,000 total units in operation. The public housing and Section 8 budget represented pretty much 99% of all of our revenues. We were producing an annual budget of about $110 million. Today, we are about a $500 million a year operation. We've got 5,000 public housing units, another 2,000 privately owned affordable units, and 9,000 Section 8 vouchers. But the condition of our assets at that time was being maintained. If you can be happy with that, you know, it was maintaining old stock, some of which was obsolete, some of which was just, you know, in areas that did not support family needs, and some of which weren't being maintained well. So we, you know, started out in 1998 by doing a physical and social viability analysis on all of our assets. It was 18 properties, looking at each one of them, deciding which one of them have long-term physical viability as affordable housing and social viability as housing for families. And we found that 2 sites just did not have social viability or physical viability at all. We divested ourselves of those 2 sites, sold those properties for commercial development because they were located in areas that was very undesirable to have people living in. And then we had about half of our inventory that just needed to be repositioned in the market, needed new amenities, needed, you know, fresh look and a major rehab on all those units. So we systematically went through the city on all of those sites doing what we call comprehensive modernization, changing the roof line, changing the landscape, reconfiguring some of the units, you know, just doing major rehab, about $40,000+ per unit level renovations, so that those units survive for the next 20 years. And so that those sites in those really choice neighborhoods weren't easily identifiable visually as poor housing, poor people's housing, low-income housing. That's the public housing. And those sites today really are indistinguishable in those neighborhoods as low-income housing. They look just like, if not better, than all the private housing in those neighborhoods. And that's very important for us to have our families living in the community and not being stigmatized because, you know, people can easily point to the public housing in the community. And then the other half of our inventory, 6 big sites, we felt that needed to be torn down and redeveloped. And once again, we systematically pursued grant funding and other, funding opportunities to literally take down and rebuild those communities. And we've systematically rebuilt all those communities. Now we're up to our last remaining obsolete public housing community, large super block, and that is Robles Park Village. And that is currently going through relocation and poised to start redevelopment starting next year.
Just out of curiosity, for all those projects that you rehab, were you were all of those tax credit deals, or were you able to do some of that just with refis and things of that nature?
Right. Most of them, half of them were not tax credits or bond financed at all, but they were rehabbed with capital fund dollars, essentially rehab dollars that we received from the federal government for public housing. So that was half of the inventory that was doing the comprehensive modernization on. The redevelopment sites, most of them were bond, all of them was tax exempt bond finance, with the exception of, I want to say, 3 developments that were 9% tax credit deals. So when I say we took down 6 large properties, those 6 large properties today probably represent 15 or 16 properties, because as we build them back, we build back in phases. So, we had an East Tampa site that was a HOPE VI development financed by HUD. That was a tax exempt bond deal, and it was built back as 3 phases. 1 phase of which was a 9%, and 2 phases were tax exempt bond debt with 4% tax credits. And then other phases like Encore Tampa, which is now 4 phases of mixed income housing. Only 1 of those phases is a 9% deal. 3 of those phases are bond deals with 4% tax credits. And then likewise in West River, we now have 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 buildings completed. And of those 8 buildings, we have 2 9% deals. I want to say 2 sale bond deals. And then the other buildings are tax exempt bonds and 4% credits.
Excellent.
So a variety of financing and the capital stacks on some of these deals will really amaze you, because they could reach easily 12, 13 sources of funding. And our largest, most complex capital stack that we've assembled is 15 sources of funding to complete 1 development.
Can you walk us through one of your favorite projects that you've worked on over the past 25 years? I know it can be a tough question to answer.
Wow, favorite project. Well, I'll just use Encore because it's probably the most recognizable by most people. Encore is a very special project in that it is our most sustainable project. We reach LEED Gold on individual buildings. Our entire 12 city block neighborhood will be a LEED Gold on the neighborhood development category. And so we're super proud of that. It also has incredible state-of-the-art architect or site infrastructure. And we started with the site infrastructure. It was the opportunity just before the real estate downturn in 2006, 2007. We had relocated this site, and we had started demolishing the property. And we knew from the offset we wanted this to be our one of the most sustainable communities in the city. So we intentionally wanted to reuse all of the concrete from all those barrack style buildings that was demolished. So we stockpiled all of the crushed concrete from that site, reused it for the base material and all of the new network of roads on that property. And the real estate market sort of tanked there. We were sitting there with a site that had streets in place, had already been cleared, already been fully entitled for vertical development. And so we had the most shovel-ready site in the US at the time, and was able to successfully compete for some federal funding in the stimulus rounds to stimulate the economy, receive the largest single award of Neighborhood Stabilization Phase 2 funding in the country of $38 million, which allowed us to build back all that incredible infrastructure, which includes not only great connected network of streets, but deploying low impact development standards so that, the site itself percolates and does not just turn into a watershed to send water elsewhere. We built a stormwater retention vault, 33,000 cubic foot storage capacity on a really small little site, I think 13,000 square feet of land. And that vault pretty much allowed us to contain all of the rainwater that comes on that 12 city block site. We store it underground in the vault. We filter it and send it right back to each of the 12 lots for irrigation. And we also built a state-of-the-art chilled water facility on that site to provide air conditioning for all 12 city blocks. And that chiller building receives makeup water from that site. We tie in all the parcels, condensation lines, and we reuse all the condensation that's produced on that site. We have solar panels that more than offset our entire street lighting grid for Encore. So it's just an incredible site. We have a 2-acre urban farm. We're doing urban farming in downtown Tampa. And this is not a community garden. This is a high production urban farm that's producing thousands of tons of cabbage and lettuce and bananas and, all types of fresh produce, organic produce. We harvest eggs on that site from chickens. We harvest honey from 2 beehives that we have there. And, it's part of our effort toward ensuring that, low-income communities have access to fresh food sources. This was a food desert when we started the redevelopment. It's now got a grocery store under contract coming to this site. So having that urban farm on this site allows us to reduce that, that distance from seed to plate, as they call it, from where you plant, your food to where you harvest it. We don't have to transport it from Waimama. We don't have to transport it from California, so the opportunity for restaurants and people who live in close proximity to literally walk across the street and purchase their fresh fruit and produce is just an opportunity that you don't see in other great cities. So we're very proud of the Meacham Urban Farm and our partnership there that does that. So, and that's just the infrastructure. That's not now talking about, we can switch now to the residential units that are built on top. We've got 2 buildings that are dedicated to low-income housing for seniors, elderly seniors, 160 unit L at Encore, 158 units at Reed at Encore. We have 2 buildings that are dedicated to mixed income housing for families, 141 units at Trio at Encore, 70% affordable, 30% market rate, and the 203 units at Tempo at Encore, which is also 70% affordable and 30% market rate. And then we have 2 market rate buildings as well, 288 units at Legacy at Encore, all market rate and workforce, and 288 units at Navarro at Encore, also for families, market rate and workforce housing. So having that perfect blend of workforce, market, and affordable all on one site with more to come, is the kind of community that I would love to live in. And I think the people who live there truly enjoy the diversity of people and the diversity of uses that are on site.
Wow, that's amazing. Urban farm, right? You said that's downtown?
Downtown, urban farm.
Wow.
Beach of urban farm.
Unbelievable.
Yes.
I recall one of the reasons developers loved joint venturing with housing authorities was the plethora of resources available to put into the deals, from project-based vouchers, home funds, CDBG money, list goes on and on. I noticed some of those resources for housing authorities started drying up over time. How has Tampa fared in terms of just resources available to put into deals?
Yeah, really great question. And so the resources at the federal government level has always been sporadic. It changes with the winds of politics in Washington, D.C. And that's just been the nature forever for funding for the public housing program in particular. So the Tampa Housing Authority was one of the first housing authorities in the country to sign on board to the RAD program, the Rental Assistance Demonstration Program, which allowed us to essentially freeze our subsidy on those public housing units at the level that HUD was funding at that time, but having a guarantee from the federal government that that would be the level of funding that we would get for the next 20 years. Because previously, public housing funding could be 98% of what was appropriated one year, and it could be 68% of what was appropriated the next year. And it literally had that kind of volatility in funding. And when you can't depend on stable funding, the properties suffer. The curb appeal first suffers, and then the environment for the residents who live there suffer greatly in terms of turning work orders and keeping units occupied. So that was a intentional choice of ours to get to a more stable subsidy stream for our public housing units, and it has made all the difference for us. We have now converted essentially all of our public housing to rental assistance demonstration RAD. We've got great levels of funding in place that is secured, and that grows as the rate of inflation continues to grow. So we'll get a 2 or 3% inflation adjustment on top of our guaranteed funding stream. And that then allows us to go to commercial lenders and secure loans to redevelop and do major rehab on those properties when you've got a stable source of funding coming in. And we've systematically utilized that to that extent. So that's given us the stability in funding from the federal government that housing authorities that are not under the RAD program don't enjoy today. Even before that, we invested greatly in a $12 million energy performance program. It's called EPC, Energy Performance Contract, where we essentially recognize the value in conserving water and electricity in our sites was huge. So we essentially borrowed, dollars to replace these water devices and electrical devices that was, overly, not good conservative items to be in our housing. And, we lowered our utility use substantially, which then allowed us to pay back that loan with the savings that we were generating from the utility reduction, the cost of utilities going down. So we've always tried to deploy smart business practices that the private sector utilizes in its operations, and not solely rely on the federal government to be the all the funding that we need for affordable housing, and that served us well.
Just a follow-up to that, I started off that question referencing private developers and joint venturing.
Mhm.
All of these projects that you've done, how many have you done yourself as the sole developer versus joint venturing? You know, I know Michael's has been involved in some of your projects,
Exactly.
but how effective or how often do you use the joint venture structure
Yeah.
to get your projects done?
Absolutely, quite often. About half of that inventory that I've spoken about was done through partnerships with private sector developers. Essentially, all of our larger multi-phase redevelopments, with the exception of one site, we've always done in partnership with private developers. So Michael's was our first developer partnership. We did 3 phases of HOPE VI development in East Tampa with them, which was 825 units, Bellman Heights Estates. That was, believe it or not, over 17 years ago now. We're just now going through a year 15, conversion of those sites where, we're recapitalizing the sites with new debt and equity and doing some major rehabs to those sites. And it's just incredible, the partnership that we've had with Michael's in particular, because it's very, very rare in this industry that you can say 17 years later, the principles on both the private developer side and the public housing side are the same people. So, 17 years ago, as we were, doing this HOPE VI project, both Milt was leading the operations for Michael's, and many of their senior people are still in place. Myself, Jerome Ryans, the president and CEO of Tampa Housing Authority here, and myself as his senior vice president are both in the same seats here. So the same parties that signed the original documents 17 years later signing the re-syndication documents, you just don't see that. It certainly makes negotiations, trust in partners, a lot better when you've got that kind of relation, with partners. We've had other great partnerships with Bank of America, CDC. We're our primary business partner on the Encore at Tampa. And we're in a great partnership now with Related on the West River site, where we've now deployed in that partnership over 8 buildings in the last 6-7 years. We have other partnerships with them in other parts of the city of Tampa as well. So probably our biggest single partnership is with Related these days. And we've got a new partnership that we're greatly looking forward to, lots of synergy with PMG, Property Market Groups, PMG, Affordable, out of New York, who's our partner at Robles Park Village. So we've really enjoyed, some really great partnerships with private developers. We typically approach these deals as a 50-50 partnership, where literally we have, 50% equity stake, 50% decision-making, in the general partnerships. We enter into that partnership. We jointly contribute toward closing any funding gaps to get the project closed. And we split developer fee 50-50. And then typically on the back end, we exit that private partner and we become the sole GP after conversion to permanent financing on all of those deals.
Do you have any type of specific programs for minority developers or contractors to get engaged with?
Yeah, great question again. Thanks for that as well. So our relationship with Related is a minority developer partner of ours, and it's been really great having as a prime developer, a minority developer. We also have partnerships. I'm thinking of the Archway SPS partnership, which is a partnership between 2 developers, which includes a Black female developer with SPS. And they are, I think, a 30% member in that developer partnership. And we are working with a number of minority developers in particular on our West River site that we're trying to get a couple of projects in the ground on. So we're always looking for the opportunity to help grow minority developers in particular. We've had great success at growing and contributing to the growth of minority contractors, dating back 25 years now on many of our projects. We've had major projects, including Encore Tampa, for instance, which the $28 million in infrastructure that I spoke about, that was all awarded to a Black minority-owned general contractor that literally started with us a decade earlier doing $100,000 and $200,000 projects, and rose to be able to do that $28 million infrastructure project for us. We've also had other major multi-million-dollar projects that's generated as high as 60+% minority participation on the contractor side. So growing that developer partnerships is something that we're very interested in, and we're always looking for developers of color in particular that we can partnership with and do deals with. The opportunity exists.
A common theme we come across from our guests, and you alluded to it for a minute, is the importance of relationships, networking, just outside activities. Can you speak to the importance those played for you?
Yeah, certainly. Professional, relationships in this business, get you to the table for sure. Here at Tampa Housing Authority, we've always supported our staff being involved in community groups and organizations and professional organizations, and not just, their role at the Housing Authority, but being out helping other organizations. So, we have staff that are actively involved with other nonprofits and, going through Leadership Tampa, Leadership Hillsborough programs that's intentional to build relationships with private companies, with utility companies, with other governmental executives, so that when we have a need, we know who to call and who to partner with, to get good work done. Our senior staff is all expected to serve in this community outside of their job at the Tampa Housing Authority. I'll use myself in particular. The current boards that I sit on that are very, very meaningful to me is Habitat for Humanity, Hillsborough. I've been on that board for 6-7 years now. We participate in home builds. Myself, as well as our president and CEO, just completed the CEO build for Habitat a couple of weeks ago, where we literally, are on site for a whole day, helping to build housing for, income eligible persons in our communities. I'm also on the board of Florida Housing Coalition. I'm an officer on that board. I am the past chair of ULI Tampa Bay. I'm the current chair of the governance committee for ULI. I am the current global governing trustee with ULI on the international side. And I'm also a member of the America's Executive Committee for ULI. But, other members of the Housing Authority are actively serving on CDC boards and, land trust boards in the community action agency boards, and the like. So public service outside of THA is very important. And like I said, it actually builds those relationships. It allows us to be in proximity with others in the community, and we can bring better array of services to our clients, to our residents, by knowing people in these other areas. And certainly from a business partnership standpoint, it's been very meaningful for us to be as involved as I am with ULI, with Urban Land Institute, not only the professional knowledge that I get, but the peer-to-peer exchange when you're literally able to sit with other very large, very astute and accomplished, developers, throughout the U.S. and abroad. So those are very meaningful, boards and representations to me. I've been a member of ULI for, I want to say 28 years now, and attribute, most of my professional growth and knowledge to the value that I get out of the ULI experience.
We just came through COVID, and after that started to simmer down, the rise in interest rates slowed down the momentum for a lot of deals. How has the housing authority fared during the high interest rate, environment, or the increased interest rate environment that we're in, and that coming through COVID?
Yeah, it's certainly impacted us, probably more so than other industries. Certainly on the market rate and the luxury side, we don't have the ability to increase our rents, to cover that increase in cost of capital in particular. So what we have to do is get more and more creative, and we do that by through partnerships, by leveraging, and frankly by putting some of our own equity, more and more of our own equity into deals to close gaps. So that's how we've done it. When I said to you earlier, we've had projects as complex as 15 layers of source of funding. That's, as the interest rates increase, now insurance on the back end, on the operating side, insurance is really hurting a lot of our sites from an operational standpoint. So being able to be creative and look to and secure funding from the city, from the county, from the state, taking advantage of brownfield credits, taking advantage of affordable housing program funding through the Federal Home Loan Banks. Federal Home Loan Bank of San Francisco in particular is a source that we go to quite often for their AHP program to help complete the capital stack on many of our projects. And then at the end of the day, there's still, $2-3 million worth of gap that just can't be closed. So because of entrepreneurial business opportunities that the Tampa Housing Authority has been engaged in the last 20 years, doing the statewide contract in particular, collecting developer fees on our partnership deals, we are able to plug gaps ourselves. So at the end of the day, we're still getting the work done, the very needed work done, even though interest rates are making it more and more difficult for us. It's just another source in the capital stack for us at the end of the day.
Wow, it's you're in a great situation if you could put your own equity in to close gaps. That is a good situation to be in. Going forward, I know you guys still have a lot of stuff in your pipeline, but for the benefit of our listeners who are folks looking to get in the industry and some emerging developers, what piece of advice would you want to share with them, based on your own extraordinary career?
Well, first of all, to look at housing authorities as a potential partner, and realize that there is a sort of public process that will entail and require, but understand that it's a great way to begin for new developers, in my opinion, because you have the potential of partnering with an institution in your community in the form of a housing authority that typically has a wealth of land, right? Land that can be used creatively in a partnership. Units built and delivered to the market. We don't always have to sell our land in order to have it be used for housing. We can, create member loans that are soft debt on the unit that's paid on the back end out of cash flow, or that's deferred for the life of the project until resyndication. So housing authorities are usually land rich. Housing authorities also have access to sources that other parties can't necessarily access. If it's public housing, there's capital fund dollars that comes from HUD every year There are major grants that are available every year in the form of choice neighborhood grants. There's a lot of other grant programs through the Economic Development Administration, Department of Commerce, Department of HHS, and others that can be tapped by housing authorities depending on the type and nature of project that you're building. So, realizing the value of partnering with the housing authority and the opportunities that exist there. Also, housing authorities have certain enabling characteristics, granted from the state government. Housing authorities can, conduct eminent domain proceedings and takings, when that need exists. Housing authorities can issue bond debt, government purpose bonds. Some housing authorities are issuers, some housing authorities are rated issuers of bond debt. So those are all, and housing authorities, one of the bigger areas that you can partner with the housing authority at is on the Section 8 side. One, just be a Section 8 landlord, where your property now can, attract a tenant-based Section 8 voucher holder, which in most communities now are paying very good rent. And some housing authorities are able to go to what's called the small area fair market rent, where it's zip code by zip code. So it's not the MSA, one rent for the whole MSA, but it's zip code by zip code. So if you're in a zip code that has high prices, the rent rate is higher in those zip codes. Housing authorities have the ability to go to 110% of fair market rent. So there's just a lot of opportunities with housing authorities. On the Section 8 side also, you have the ability to get project-based Section 8 assistance in partnership with the housing authority. So in Tampa in particular, we're always looking for landlords or developers that is willing to make some of their units available to special needs populations. And that could be veterans, that could be youth aging out of foster care, that could be seniors, disabled populations, variety of, needs that exist. And we have vouchers that we can project base to your development, where you then can, have that assurance of that monthly revenue coming in every month on time, and a good rate of rent at that, if indeed the housing authority is, keeping current with its, rent reasonableness calculations.
Where do you see Tampa in the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, certainly continue to grow. The in-migration numbers in Tampa in particular are really great, and it's going to continue to support more and more residential growth. But I think we are on the right path to invest in diverse communities, communities that have a diversity of people, both income-wise as well as diversity of uses. I think in the next 5 years also, you will see Tampa finally get its act right in terms of attracting and deploying more modern mass transit to connect our populations. We've been intentionally building to, densities that would support mass transit nodes, both in our downtown core and the West Tampa and East Tampa and all the way up to the university. And that opportunity exists now to deploy some light rail systems in the city. And we've worked for a long, long time to try to get that. I'm hopeful in the next 5 years you'll see that. I'm almost certain in the next 5 years you will see the high-speed connection into Tampa to connect Tampa to Orlando and all the way down to Miami. The first high-speed rail project in the state of Florida is already from Miami through Orlando, and they've already announced the next stop is in Tampa. And the site in Tampa is literally steps away from our Encore development. So, having that public transportation mode is going to hopefully reduce some of our family's dependency on that second automobile in the family, which is a huge extra cost. So we try to make sure that our families can not only live affordably from a rent paying standpoint, but that they're also close to jobs. So they are less dependent on getting in that vehicle and driving. And if now they can actually have statewide connectivity that's not 100% dependent on a personal automobile, it just allows them to, reduce their family budget substantially more.
Excellent. Looking at your career, if you were able to do it all over again, is there anything at all you would do differently?
Well, Stephen, that's a question that I could probably sit here and be quiet for 5 minutes while I think, but that's not what you want. I'm very pleased with all of the choices I've made to get to where I'm at today in my career. I think I'm exactly where I need to be. I think, this has been a divine appointment. That's how I felt a lot of times, that, when we made decisions that, we weren't quite sure about, divine intervention turned it into the right decision at the end of the day. So, I feel blessed to be exactly where I'm at here. I wouldn't change any step in my path to get to right here where I'm at.
Well, great. Well, that'll wrap us up with another episode of the Real Estate Shop. Leroy, thanks for coming by, and we look forward to staying in touch with you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Another day at the shop. Content they can't get anywhere else.